Hello, welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated on news and current affairs, what is happening in Nigeria and also outside the country. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham, and I'm doing the program together with Rachel Tanzi. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Sarah.
And to our viewers and supporters at home, do well to follow us live on Facebook and on YouTube, and then you can drop your own comment and your views on any of the story that is of interest to you this morning. And we shall go straight into the papers, starting with the Blueprint newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, COVID-19 reps query Water Resources Ministry over 25 million naira borehole. Appeal court sacks Nasarawa speaker. Beware of ATM swapping fraud, AFCC warns Nigerians. You can find details on page 8. Return Niger to democratic rule, northern senators tell military junta. You can find details on page 5. The big story on the paper, Kano Guba appeal, judiciary will redeem own image, sanction airing officials. Petitions flood CGN's office, group uncovers plot to cause unrest in Kano metropolis. You can find details of the big story on page 6 and page 13. First Bank UK adopt Bloomberg terms to optimize workflow. Anxiety as recapitalization fears grip banks. You can find details on page 21. 1.2 billion naira fraud prosecution witnesses clear Emefiele. You can find details on page 18. And at the downside of the paper, Tinubu seeks National Assembly approval for fresh $8.7 billion 100 million euros loans, and Senate passes 57 billion naira police trust fund budget. You can find details on page 6, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the leadership newspaper. EFCC witnesses clear Emefiele of 1.2 billion naira fraud, with detail on page 4. Nasarawa secured 3 mining licenses for gold and lithium, detail found on page 14. And on what's trending on the leadership newspaper, appeal court affirmed Fubara as Rivers governor. FEC approves 27.5 trillion naira for the 2024 budget. Detail of both stories can be found on page 2. Collective investment scheme grew by 581 billion naira in 10 months. And Tinubu seek approval to borrow 8.699 billion dollars and then 100 million euros, with detail found inside the paper. Also, Nigeria resists demand for oil production court. 18 IPOB members arrested over killing of DPO inspector. Northern senators want electricity restored in Niger Republic. And the big story here, Kano governorship appeal. Judge faces judicial council wrath over clerical error. I take the story. Judge faces judicial council wrought over clerical error, with the rider sanction in line with our self-cleansing process. Fubara Aliyu Kefas affirm as Rivers, Sokoto, and Taraba governors. Nasarawa speaker sack. You can find detail of that on page 4. And the picture story here, we can see our core members in a talk of war at the opening swearing-in ceremony of the 2023 BAT C Stream 2 orientation course in Kaduna yesterday, and that's all on the leadership newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, pensioners' assets in domestic foreign stocks up 59.6% to 1.5 trillion naira. Military onslaught forced 160,000 terrorists to lay down arms, coming from Zulum. You can find details on page 13. The Guardian lecture on how Nigeria, Africa can earn global respect, coming from Adesina, that is the African Development Bank CEO. You can find more details on page 8. On alleged fraud, Emefiele, not owner of firm, awarded 1.2 billion naira contract. This is coming from a witness. You can find details of the ongoing trial on page 9. The big story on the paper, Tinubu's new $8.6 billion loan bid takes debt above $51.759 billion. The writer under the story requests part of 2022 to 2024 external borrowing plan for critical infrastructures, President to present 2024 appropriation bill to joint session of National Assembly today. Total domestic debt as at June is 54.1300 trillion naira. Analyst experts seek proper utilization and accountability. You can see details on page 5. Imo DPO officers to face sanction over alleged escape of suspected rapist. More details can be found on page 11. And on controversial judgment, we will do our best to reform justice sector, coming from the Attorney General of the Federation. More details can be found on page 9. It's possible to grow trillion-dollar economy in 10 years, a statement from President Tinubu. Details can be found on page 8. Appeal court affirms Fubara as Rivers governor. More details can be found on page 12. We have a column where you can see Afe Babalola talking on the declaration of the State of Israel, and then you can find details on page 21. And then we have sports column on 37. Pisero's time runs out as technical committee ready to wield axe. We have picture story at UBA's Carol evening, and that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at what the Punch newspaper have for us. Ondo crisis worsen, Assembly demands Ayedatiwa resignation. Heavy security presence as Ondo Assembly lawmakers make condition for truce. Detail found on page 25. And still on Supreme Court, NJC screened 22 nominees candidate face DSS and others. Justice Kekeri Edu head screening panel. Tinubu may get the list Friday, with detail found on page 2. The big story on the bank recapitalization. Federal government backs CBN investors rush for mega bank stock. We must address bank capital adequacy to grow the economy. This is coming from Tinubu's advisor. Investors inject 110 billion naira in UBA, FBN, and Zenith assets and other stock in 2 days, with detail on page 19. FCT police nab suspected murderer, kidnappers, robbers, and recover arms. You can see picture story of the people who were actually caught with all of that. Boko Haram terrorists behead 10 Borno loggers. This is really a sad one. You can do well to find more detail of that story. We hope the security agency are working tirelessly to bring such people to book. Emifele fails to perfect bill. EFCC opens 1.2 billion naira trial, with detail in the paper. And on the cool scare, 34 declared wanted ECOWAS team arrives Sierra Leone, with detail on page 25. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, in Niger Republic, northern senators ask ECOWAS to lift sanctions, urge Tinubu to restore electricity supply, tax military junta to roll out transition plan, and release Bazoum. You can find details on page 30. Tinubu seeks National Assembly's approval for $8.6 billion, 100 million euros, 2022 to 2024 borrowing plan. We can build trillion-dollar economy in 10 years, a statement from the president. I bear no grudge against media practitioners, he adds. You can find more details on page 2, 4, and 8. The big story on the paper, Ayedatiwa Ondo speaker reveals details of deal brokered by Tinubu. Highlights how deputy governor will sign undated resignation later to be submitted to president. Says he remains Ondo deputy governor. Impeachment proceedings halted. Take actions for still further crisis over Akeredolu's absence. Ondo indigents write the Chief Justice of the state. You can find more details on page 2 and 13. Ekiti government sues Chief Damis Pastor, demands 10 million naira damages. Minister of Power to prioritize metering, distribution, transmission, infrastructure. Shaun of Obomosho to get staff of office December 19. Details can be found on page 30. Alleged procurement fraud, Emefile yet to meet bill condition. Court adjourns hearing to January 2024. Senate passes 57 billion naira police trust fund budget. And we have Osoba to chair Olamity's book launch on Thursday. More details can be found on page 13. That's all news on Nigerian Tribune.
On Daily Sun newspaper, 18 IPOB members arrested over killing of 2 police officers in Imo State. Detail found on page 5. And on loans, Tinubu seek fresh $8.699 billion and 100 million euros to channel the fund to agri, wood and others to present the 2024 appropriation bill. Today, you can find details of both stories on page 2. And on the electoral reform, Jega called for ban on cross-carpeting INEC unbundling, and that happened yesterday during the citizen town hall meeting that took place in the early hour around 11 a.m. So that citizen town hall meeting where we had quite a number of people reach. We had a number of civil organizations there. We had a number, even the former INEC chairman, that is Jega, was present there, and a lot of people were giving solution or providing solution to some of the electoral reforms we need to have, because a lot of people have called for an electoral reform because we know what happened during the presidential election down to the various gubernatorial election, and then presently with the various petitions we're having in the court presently, there is a call for the electoral reform because a lot of things need to be checked again. And this is where Jega makes some of the suggestion where he feels that another problem we're having is where we have politicians cross-carpeting from one party to the another. You will be elected in a particular party. For example, you were elected in the AA party as the governor of a state, and then eventually along the way you want to cross-carpet to another party. It is only mandatory, or it is only, applicable that you should resign the office because it was AA who gave you the position, not for you to go to another party and then still retain your position. So there is a need for some of this reform because we need to unbundle some of the things that INEC have actually said. And then looking at what is happening in the courts presently right now, a lot of things coming out, structure, no structure, and then whether there will be a display of some of this result electronically or not, there is a call for it. And I really feel that if truly the government would pay attention to that citizen town hall meeting that held yesterday and some of the solution, some of the recommendations that were given, Nigeria will be a better place, Richard, because we saw where people with disabilities were calling for inclusion in election, because it's high time we tell them to come out and go elect politicians and elect leaders, and then they are not being elected to position. They also have the right. Women also feel they are being excluded from all of this thing. Youth also feel to be there. So quite a number of things was being mentioned there during that town hall meeting, and I just hope that attention will be given to all of this, because we saw representative of the member of House of Representatives, the Senate, and all of that. So I'm really happy that something of that nature, because that was the first of its nature in Nigeria. But I hope that we'll see more people being, beyond having a town hall meeting, Rachel. Now, right now, Nigerians are hoping to see the actions being applicable in all of our elections henceforth.
It's about time that, yes, there is that reform coming from INEC, and we will not stop hitting the point that they are an independent electoral commission, meaning when INEC sits down and see, okay, this thing didn't work for us, I believe they have the power to say we are changing certain electoral laws, we are bringing this, we are taking this down, we are making policies and regulations because this obviously didn't work out. This was the effect of it, and we are seeing the damage it will cause in the future. So yes, INEC has that capacity to sit down and do that. And it's more about the work, not just the talk. Because it's another thing for us to have the town hall meeting and then come 2027 or elections that will be happening by 2024 for us to see the same mistakes being repeated. It's all about the work. And then I keep saying it, INEC, do your job, you're independent. Prove to Nigerians and show us that you are truly, you have a mind of your own and you have a say in what happens post-election, during election and pre-election, because you were given that authority. Show Nigerians that you know what you're doing and you have the power. And I believe this is one thing. I mean, before 2027, let's start seeing new electoral laws. Let's start seeing regulations. Let's start seeing policies and with sanctions. And let's see INEC being strict when there is any when anybody fails to adhere. Let's see sanctions. Let's just see drastic measures being taken that will start maybe restoring the faith people have on INEC before 2027. It can be done in 2024. Let's just see something coming from INEC that will give Nigerians some hope that, you know what, we have better INEC, and that 2027 will definitely be different when it comes to the general elections.
Just to add up again, to part of the thing that I'll discuss, and I totally agree with the fact that it's high time the president stop appointing who is the chairman of INEC, and also some of the rec we are having, because we are having issues whereby it feels as if we are having particular loyalists being appointed, and then when you definitely have lawyers of a particular party, it will definitely affect the outcome of any election, because they will be biased whether they want to or not. So I feel that with all of this thing, Yaga Africa was there. A lot of people made comment, and I just hope that the president will take all of this thing into cognizance, and then we see every relevant body also taking that into cognizance. Still on the Daily Sun newspaper, we have appeal court affirm Bubara victory squashes Nasarawa Assembly Speaker's election, with detail found on page 4. Engineers hail Tinubu on road regeneration plan, with detail in the paper. 1 killed, 2 escape with loot as vigilante confronts armed bandits in Abia. Also, we are having Abia stop payment of salary of unverified staff. You can find out on page 29. We have 2 picture stories on the front page of the paper. One is the Senate Committee Chairman, Privatization and Communalization, Senator Ozi Kalu, with the Director General, Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, Charles, during the latter's visit in Abuja yesterday. And the second here, we're having the Executive Director, ADEX, and the Group Head Marketing and Corporate Communication of the UBA Foundation, Guardian Marine Lagos. You can do well to grab the paper in more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Nation newspaper, President seeks $8.6 billion, 100 million euros loans to improve livelihood. Fulfill $100 billion pledge on climate change, Tinubu to tell US and the EU. MFA yet to meet bill conditions, back in prison. Obaseki should have consulted me on successor, says Shaibu. You can find details of both stories on page 4 and 7. The big story on the paper, Speaker Aiyedatiwa to send quit letter. You can find more details on page 4. We have congratulatory message to Malam Melekiari that has been reappointed as the GCEO of NNPCL, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
Well, I hope Malik Kyari realized that there's a lot of work, so we want to see reform also in that sector as well, because for you to be reappointed means the president has faith in you, so we do not want to see laxity coming from that sector again. So our fingers are crossed, and we wish him all the best as he takes off this responsibility. Let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper, where we have, after $3 billion crook deal, additional warrants against resource-backed debts. You can find detail of that story on page 6. Jega asks lawmakers to prescribe cross-carpeting by politicians, one INEC unbundled. Detail found on page 3. Tinubu seeks Senate validation of $8.6 billion, 100 million euros loan approved by Buhari government. Over 27 million kids driven into hunger, malnutrition by extreme weather. You can find that on page 8. Subsidy removal has battered us with hardship pain, says pensioners. You can find detail on page 9. Appeal court affirms Bubara as Rivers governor dismissed coal and other suit. Detail found on page 2. We also have at the Guardian lecture, Tinubu pledges more powers to state and local councils, and I hope we'll begin to see that being effective as well. You can find detail of the story in the paper, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Rivers Guber poll, Fubara emerges victorious at appeal court. Our commitment to press freedom and accurate news relentless. This is coming from the editors from Nigerian News Direct celebrating their 13 years. Again, stock market closes negative with 164.7 billion naira loss. The big story on the paper, Tinubu seeks National Assembly approval for fresh $8.7 billion, 100 million euros loans to defend 2024 budget, borrowing plan at joint plenary session. More details can be found on page 4. Governor Abiodun rewards TASUED graduating students with 2 million naira cash gift. 226 crude oil theft incidents recorded in 1 week coming from NNPC Limited. You can find more details on page 2. And I mean, if we can record the number of theft going on crude oil, then it means we have progress concerning what is being stolen, because in the past it's almost like we couldn't account for exactly what is being stolen from us in regarding crude oil. So if we know that we have in a week over 226 crude oil theft incidents, then we start working on who, what, when, where, and how. Who are the people involved? How is it happening? And then I believe that then the numbers can start going down, because we now have an estimate of the kind of attack we face when it comes to crude oil theft. So I just hope that the NNPC does something about it, and every other law enforcement agencies, our navies, and all of that, people who are in charge of protecting our seas and then crude oil, to do something about it. You can find details on page 2. We have a picture story showing the UBA Christmas Carol, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
Alright, a New Telegraph newspaper on smuggling. Importers lost 58.7 billion naira worth of goods to the federal government. Detail found in the paper. Apprehension over Nigerians caught at Apex Blood meets tomorrow. You can find detail of that story on page 2. Court adjourns Emifele's case till January 18, 2024. Supreme Court didn't deliver judgment in Obi's case against Tinubu. This is coming from the Labour Party. And on the 2023 polls, we are liable for PDP's poor outing in Benue. This is coming from the former Governor Otom. And then how NIN and other application discrepancy delay passport insurance. You can find that story on page 5. This is coming from the Immigration Office. Tinubu seeks Senate approval for a fresh $8.6 billion, 100 million euros loan. Says $1 trillion economy possible in 10 years. Red Chamber passes 57 billion naira police trust fund 2023 budget. Detail found on page 3 and 4. And on Niger coup, northern senators demand Bazoum and family members release. Confusion in Bauchi Assembly as Supreme Court sacked the Speaker and Deputy, affirmed Bubara's election as Rivers Governor. And we have 5 million bounty, mother lands over wanted son to Kanu police. This will be a hard one for her, but just so that she can be accountable and also to eradicate that, we're seeing the mother handing over her wanted son to the police. Detail found on page 31. And on the peace accord, Ayedatiwa to sign and submit his resignation letter. This is coming from Ondo Speaker. And Boko Haram, we are having the defense minister, service chief in Meduguri as militant behead 11 loggers. Farmers and herders clash, demand innovative solution. This is coming from the Benue governor. You can find more detail of that on page 2 and 3. And we have a study here that said the ADHD drugs linked to heart disease risks. So for those who are actually involved, I think it's important for everybody to read that study and see if you're at risk or not. You can find detail of that on page 28. And that's all a New Telegraph newspaper.
On First News newspaper, the big story: Ondo Assembly's plot to declare Ayedatiwa acting governor fails. Speaker reveals Deputy Governor is to sign and submit undated resignation letter to President Tinubu. Governor Otu inaugurates new aircraft, plans for additional 3. And on Adamawa attack, we are not at war with military, coming from IGP. Ex-petroleum minister excelled in corruption, coming from T.Y. Danjuma. INEC should be unbundled, statement coming from Jega. Supreme Court didn't give judgment in Obi's case, coming from Labour Party. MFLA to spend Christmas, New Year in prison. Reps move to halt alleged plan by Edo State government to spill Benin Kingdom. Rivers Guba Appeal Court dismisses case against Fubara. And at the downside of the paper, leadership crisis rocks Bauchi Assembly as court sacks Speaker and Deputy. We have a picture story where we can see as the TASUED convocation from left to right, Vice Chancellor Tai Solarin, University of Education, and then we have Ijebu Ode, Ogun State, Professor Oluwole Banjo, His Excellency Ogun State Governor Prince Dapo Abiodun, the recipient of honorary doctorate degree, Reverend Tunde Lemo, and we have OFRN, his spouse, Pastor Mrs. Yemi Lemo, and we have Executive Director Lord Forter Gate Schools at the convocation of TSUED, where Lemo was awarded a DSC Economics honorary cursor on Tuesday, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
A look at the Voice of Liberty on COP28 summit. Tinubu depart Abuja for Dubai today. Another summit again. You can do well to look up that story in the paper. And still on the issue of Boko Haram, we are seeing that Boko Haram behead 11 loggers. And Rachel, this call for a lot of concern. What is the government doing there? We just saw that of Zamfara, where about 110 indigents or citizens had to leave their or vacate their community because of a threat coming from some Boko Haram bandits actually telling them they do not pay 110 million naira. Then they are coming to abduct more people from that community. And here we've seen that Boko Haram are again out just when we thought that it's silent over there in Borno.
We just saw in the paper the Governor Zulum said military toughness or something like that is the reason why there is insurgency going low in the state and have been able to combat some things. But now we are seeing that Boko Haram have just killed 11 loggers, and then it's really sad. It's almost like progress is being made and then like 10 steps forward and like 100 steps backward, because we shouldn't be hearing this, and it's really really sad.
And Richard, it breaks my heart because just in a time when we're looking at how we can make our economy better, God, believe me, whatever step the president, the ministers, senators are trying to put their heads together to see that more is happening, and even the governor of the state is seeing how he can actually even attract investors. Because believe me, nobody wants to go to Borno State. In fact, the moment you hear the mention of that name, you are afraid because your safety just to get there, it's a problem. It's more like say you're going to Afghanistan, and then it's heartbreaking, especially when you say you're going to Borno. And I just hope that the governor, he's trying his best. We've seen him trying all he can do. There was a time during the former president, he called on Buhari, let them have international body coming to help them fight the insurgents happening in Borno, because it seems it's getting out of hand. He said there's no shame in saying if you need help, you request for help to come help you to fight all of these insurgents, because there are places who have had that issue before and then they have conquered. So how were they able to conquer it? And just like we keep saying, these people are not spirits. They are flesh. We know where they are. People know where they are. They have family members. But then just like we've always bring to the forefront of our leaders that if people will report this is the person, this is where they are, how about the safety of those people and their loved ones? Because we've had situations where someone is being kidnapped and then they are asking for ransom, and then you go to maybe your own worship center, whether it's the mosque or the church, and you're asking for help, and then before you even leave there, you receive a call from the bandit saying, haven't you gotten the money? Say, I'm still trying. But we're told that offering was, and you wonder how did these people, that is to say that they live within us. So it's all for us to have an open eyes and to be very vigilant about people you actually get involved with. And it's really a sad one. So we said our condolences to the family of these loggers that were being beheaded by Boko Haram. We hope to see more steps being taken to take care of insurgents. Still on the Voice of Liberty, we're seeing here missing 43 billion naira revenue, the House of Rep to hand over the NCAA management to the EFCC. Senate grants Tinubu request for the joint budget session today. The Senate has granted a request by President Bola Tinubu to hold a joint session today for the presentation of the 2024 budget, and I know Nigerians are eager to see allocations that are being given to various sectors, so you keep your fingers crossed as we behold whatever will come out of the presentation of the budget today. An unsuspected Nigerian air Keyamo clears air on allegation against Tinubu, detail in the paper. House of Rep moved to investigate EFCC attempt to re-arrest Emifele from prison. And coming from Rivers State, we have here the appeal court upholds Governor Bubara's victory, dismiss coal and other suit. Nigerians' water now secure for local and international trade. This is coming from the Navy chief, and we are happy. That is to say that we'll see more going on over there. You can find detail of that story in the paper. And that's all on the Voice of Liberty. But before we move further with other paper analysis, we would love to take a break. We'd love to hear what your own views are concerning most of the story we've been looking at on the paper. So please stay tuned with us. When we come back, we will open the full line.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zuma Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, the program is the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper where we are saying that today the president will be presenting the 2024 budget before the joint house, that is Senate and House of Reps. Also, we're seeing that quite on the sad one in Borno State, about 11 loggers have been beheaded by Boko Haram, and then also quite a number of stories on the paper. So we hope to hear what your own views are concerning any of the story that is of interest to you. The number to call is displayed on your screen at this moment. Remember to please turn down the volume of your TV set. Be audible when you call us so we can hear you clearly, and other watchers at home, viewers, can also see and also hear you clearly as well. I still have Rachel with me in the studio. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper before the calls come in.
On the Matrix newspaper, Nigeria Air Keyamo faults Nigeria Ethiopian airline deal. House of Reps query NUPRC on declining signature bonus revenue. Alleged collusion of inmates with terrorists, minister blows hot, says it is despicable and treasonable. You can start with the details on the front page. The big story on the paper: 2023 presidential election, Labour Party fires fresh salvo at Supreme, says Apex Court's refusal to deliver judgment in its appeal embarrassing and depressing, constitutes unmitigated breach of constitutional right of labor, albeit to fair hearing. You can find details on page 2. Nigerian publishers want local paper production revived, decry merchants' monopoly. Appeal court affirms Fubara as Rivers governor, throws out coal and other suits. You can find more details on page 8. And in Edo 2024, Baseki intimidated, harassed me over governorship ambition, a statement coming from Shaibu. You can find details on page 8. Tinubu writes House of Reps seeks approval to borrow additional $8.6 billion and 100 million euros. President Tinubu departs Abuja for Dubai today to attend COP28 summit. You can start with the details on the front page. We have a picture story showing all for agricultural development, where we can see Vice President Kashim Shettima in a warm handshake with Executive Secretary CEO, National Agricultural Development Fund, Mr. Mohammed. This happened recently in the presidential villa in Abuja, and that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Well, let's take a look at the Nigerian Standard newspaper. Federal government reviewed draft policy on local vaccine manufacturing. Detail found in the paper. We don't want to rely on foreign artisans. And also youth unemployment include the UYAN in national budget. Arrest of investigative journalists unlawful, with detail of that found on page 18. Tinubu inherited 6 trillion naira debt in road project. This is coming from the Works Ministry. You can find more detail where he's saying that President Bola Nigerian government inherited a debt of about 6 trillion naira from the ongoing road project in the country that his predecessor Mohamed Buhari handed over to him. So you can find more detail of that. We will record that the president has given a go-ahead to fixing maintenance of the Nigerian road. Already about 300 billion naira has been, been given for that work to start right away. So you can start reading the story on the front page and continue on page 2. Mutfwan inspect rehabilitated roads in Jos and Bukru metropolis. You can find detail of that in the paper. Nigeria, ECOWAS sent delegation to Sierra Leone following the security breach that occurred in Sierra Leone on Sunday. We're seeing that ECOWAS on Monday have sent a delegation to Freetown, so our fingers are crossed to see what will happen about all of that, and then those who are involved in that can actually be brought to book. You can start and continue reading the story on page 2. That's all on the Nigerian Standard newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, Emefiele's fraud trial, how 1.3 billion naira was paid to firm linked to CBN staff by witness. You can start with the details on the front page. Northern senators asked Tinubu to drop sanctions against Niger. Insists ECOWAS must end embargo and protect Nigerians. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 7. The big story on the paper, we must prescribe cross-carpeting on bundle INEC, coming from Atahiru Jega. Stakeholders urge more reforms in 2022 Electoral Act. National Assembly committed to reforms. INEC's independence, coming from Akpabio. We can't make Aiyedatiwa acting governor, coming from Ondo Assembly. More details can be found on page 7. Tech deployed in vote buying during Kogi Imo Bayelsa polls, coming from Next Year. You can find more details on page 6. Senate rejects bill seeking parties to replace dead elected officials. You can find details of that bill on page 6. Appeal Court upholds election of Fubara as Rivers governor. You can find details on page 7. Tinubu seeks National Assemblies not to borrow $8.6 billion and 100 million euros to participate in COP28 climate summit in Dubai. You can start with the details on the front page. I mean, Sele, we saw that yesterday, of course, on the paper. From 26 trillion naira for our budget, we went up to 27.5 trillion. And immediately we said it means borrowing. And shortly after that, we are seeing the president seeking for approval of $8.6 billion and then also 100 million euros. And then we keep wondering, when will the borrowing spree stop in this country? First of all, we are giving an estimate of income that we are yet to achieve, looking at our daily oil production in the country, looking at the exchange rate, looking at every other economic factor and indicator, and yet we keep taking our budget high. Because what it means is that once this budget has been approved and passed as a bill for the MTEF for 2024 down to 2026, it means come what may, we must finance that budget. Whether we make 18 trillion naira revenue or not, we must finance that budget. That automatically means that regardless of our revenue, we are going to borrow money to finance that budget, because money will be allocated to different ministries and MDAs. And in the end, these MDAs have to get this money because they're also going back, making budget on what they have been allocated from the budget. And then the federal government have to send in that money. So I believe that, this doesn't feel good in any way for us as a country, because we are looking at how to minimize what we are going to borrow, and where we are seeing the president seeking more approvals for more loans. And it means that the deficit of 9 trillion is going to increase by the year 2024. No doubt 9 trillion deficit is just by the way. Come 2024, we will be seeing a different deficit, and then who knows, what if we don't meet this 18 trillion estimated target for revenue? This might mean that this will be more borrowing is going to take place, and then we just have to wait and see how things unfold. But I just truly hope that every estimate, most especially when it comes to revenue, that we meet it and surpass it. Perhaps we see ourselves making 20 trillion naira in revenue come 2024.
Richard, you know why I believe it's possible to have that 18 trillion naira revenue? That is to say, if everybody is honest to remit the money. You remember before this budget, we had issues where the senators were having problems with MDAs for not coming up with whatever they have, because there were reports that most times after giving them the money, before they would now bring up their budget and all of that, and so somehow it's very difficult for the senators to be able to trace what this ministry, department, and agency are doing with the money and revenue that they remit back into the government. And then let's go again to spending. Are we ready to cut down on our spending as a country? Because believe me, Rachel, from looking at our budget, this has just told the entire world that Nigeria is a rich country.
True.
Because if really we are not that rich, I mean, some of the money we're seeing, the spending we're spending, will not be spending. The SUV will be patronized one of our local manufacturers here in the country, and all of that. We'll be looking into how can we now start using our coal and our iron, and let's see how we have the industries here to be able to make it properly so we don't even have to import. Remember, all right, I think we have a call. Hello, good morning.
According to what I had.
We can hear you.
Please go ahead, sir.
Then I think the man who is in charge now ran Lagos State without even revenue. He performed very well. What is that? When he has come in as a president, I think we can use our revenue to at least run the country, not borrowing, because he ran Lagos very well. There's a sandwich in Lagos in terms of governance. Then because he did well. I remember when the allocation of Lagos State was 2. They don't even depend on the allocation. You use that the state that time. Now, we are very surprised that borrowing is everywhere. But I would advise the president to at least use the method he used in Lagos when he was the governor to carry out the administration in the country. It will be because this borrowing, there's interest there.
All right.
3 trillion naira. Because the one we are going to borrow, maybe we are owing on that side of the country, and that's part. I would say that if you use the style you use to govern Lagos, using the revenue judicially, because if you borrow this money and put all the infrastructure on ministries, those people will now, the money will be much there, and when it is much there, the all of them will put it in the opposite. But once the ministers are generating revenue, then you will use, I don't call your code according to your time.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you for your views about that.
What he is telling the president to do is that to run Nigeria like he did when he was the governor in
of
Lagos. That is no borrowing. I mean, Lagos have shown itself to thrive amidst every economic chaos, but we're talking about a state. I believe that replicating what happened in Lagos for an entire country can be very difficult if we will be honest. Let's not forget that Lagos generates revenue. Now the government is now dealing with states that don't generate that much. And there has to be allocation, there has to be funding, there has to be all of these projects that will take place in states that are barely generating anything for themselves and totally dependent on allocations from the federal government. So yes, I mean, the president can definitely sit down and say, how did I do it in Lagos, and see how we can minimize the borrowing. But then he's dealing with a total country. So we can be a little bit lenient on the president and not expect what happened in Lagos to happen in Nigeria. But there could be a replication of it and say, okay, what was I able to curtail in terms of expenditure in Lagos? What was I able to cut down, and see where you can put it for the retired Federal Republic of Nigeria and all of that. But yes, of course, nobody wants to hear that we are borrowing and borrowing, knowing fully well that we haven't finished paying what
we have borrowed in the past, and now it's just added money to what we need to spend. And we see how interest rates have increased from these countries that we're going to, because they are also trying to fight inflation in their country. So I mean, we're in for a lot, because we have the debt management office constantly complaining about how much goes to debt servicing. I believe that if we have over 90% of our revenue with the interest rates from these countries, we might be looking at over 100% of our revenue going to debt servicing, because we have to be consistent with our debt servicing. If not, we will be at the detriment of not being able to get access to these loans in the future.
That's why I said the only way possible for this borrowing to stop it, let us cut down on our spending. We've been saying this, talking about cutting down the cost of governance, and that is the only way it's possible. I mean, if the president is telling us, he's saying that he sees $1 trillion economy possible in 10 years, how are we seeing that $1 trillion economy in 10 years? There must be measures you are putting in place to be able to fight whatever is happening, the debt, and making sure that whatever we're able, this money we're able to, if we are borrowing and then we're putting it in the right sector, eventually it's a matter of time before the sector will start actually generating their own revenue on their own without us necessarily borrowing, so that we get education working, we can get transport working, get agriculture working, and all of that. So our fingers will be crossed. Let's just wait and see how the government intends to be able to make this $1 trillion in eventually. And Richard, I think that's all on Daily Independence?
Yes, that's
all right. Let's take a look at the Sweet Crew report. And on the Sweet Crew report, let's take a look at what is happening in the oil sector, where we see that military deactivated 50 illegal oil refining sites, apprehend 51 suspects. This is coming from the defense headquarters. You can find detail of that story from the front page down to page 2. Nigeria to supply more gas to Europe, more detail in the paper. And we see that power supply to improve by the first half of 2024, coming from the power minister. Ex-agitators to petition the ICJ over crude oil sale. Urge Tinubu to probe the on-front crude sale under Buhari. With detail of that story found in the paper. And that's all from the Sweet Crew reports.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Haaland yet to score against Brentford. Man City unveils Holy Trinity statue to a rival Man United. More details can be found on page 2. Real Madrid needs a point to top Group C. You can find details on page 2. The big story on the paper, Napoli insists on 150 million euros for Sime. Arsenal sets aside 120 million pounds to sign Nigerian. Man City, Arsenal to go head-to-head for Kamada. You can find more details inside the paper. Arsenal prepared to sell Partey in January. Ronaldo gets own penalty reversed. You can find details at the back page. And on 2023 AFCON, Leverkusen to stop Boniface and Teller contemplates legal action. You can find details on page 6. And we have signed fit to replace Pesero as Eagles coach. Chelsea interested in Victor Boniface. You can find details on page 6. In Chelsea debating Thiago Silva future. Gavi successfully undergoes surgery, out for 8 to 9 months. And we have LeBron James failed to rebound for the first time in over 13 years. You can find details at the back page. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
On Business Day newspaper, we are having the big story saying 2024 budget exposed Nigeria is a rich country myth. You can find detail of that story in the paper. Cheap is king as Chinese smartphone crack Africa's price point. You can find detail in the paper. African Development Bank backs Ekiti Digital Innovation Hub with $80 million loan. Tinubu to hammer on climate change, renewable energy at COP28. Detail of that can be found on page 2. Again, Tinubu seek National Assembly for approval of $8 billion and 100 million euro loan. Also, we are having other story, the picture story here we can still see is the UBA during the Christmas carol that they had recently. So you can find more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you, and that's all on Business Day newspaper. and also how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel,
You're
for doing
welcome,
this program to me. Thank you to our caller who called on the show this morning. Thank you to our viewers and supporters for always keeping it in with us on this program. Until we come again, do have a blessed day ahead.